Now, sometimes even as Christians, when we try to do things the right way and we try to do this and we try to do that and we say, God, I'm giving you my time, I'm giving you my tithe, I'm doing this, but then things sometimes still don't work. We try to be generous in this situation, but then there's an unexpected expense in our lives and we're like, God, what? This doesn't make sense. Or we pray for someone to get better and to get healed, but then they don't get better. Or even worse, then we find out that someone we care about deeply has got another health issue in their life. And we're like, God, this doesn't make sense. And we say, surely, God, it doesn't work this way. And maybe we cry out saying, God, this doesn't work. We need a better way. And what we want to do is look over the next few weeks at not just the truth that Jesus taught, although the truth that Jesus taught is important, but we want to look at the way that Jesus lived. It's not just about the words that he said, but about the way that he lived his life whilst he was on earth. And the way that he lived his life shows the truth. Sometimes it's not just about the words, but it's about the way that we live. We can say something, but our lives might not match up. I remember as a teenager in the youth room of our church, there was a poster up on the wall, and it said, if you were convicted for being a Christian, if you were arrested for being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you? Because sometimes the truth that we say doesn't always match up with the lives that we live, does it? And I think the way that we live our lives is important, but we don't always focus or we don't always look at the way that Jesus lived his life. And so that's what we're going to do over the next few weeks. That's what we did last week. That's what we're going to do this week as well. We're going to be looking at the way that Jesus lived his life. And today, as I was preparing this message, some of the stuff's quite hard, and some of the stuff probably some people might not want to hear this morning, but that's okay. And just so you know, if you don't want to hear some of the stuff that I'm talking about this morning, I also did not want to hear some of the stuff that I'm talking about this morning. And there is I'm working some of this stuff out in my own life as well, because today we're looking at busyness. And when we're too busy for what really matters, are we too busy sometimes for what really matters? Sometimes we wear busyness like a badge of honor, don't we? How are you? Oh, I'm very busy. Very busy. Oh, yes. And busyness is, we often share stories of our lives, and I've got it here in my notes. We're talking about busyness, and the fact is I was writing this in a car whilst waiting for something, grabbing half an hour here, grabbing half an hour there to say, and that's the reality of life. Sometimes we squeeze things in and we squeeze extra bits in, and sometimes we keep on adding bits onto our lives, and we say, it's okay, it's only one more thing, it's only one more thing. But then after a couple of months, that increased speed, that increased weight, that increased extras, maybe we've stopped and we just feel a little bit overwhelmed in life. And I don't know about you, maybe there's some people here in the room, actually, and it might not just be the stuff that we do, it might be the emotional stuff and that weight, but you feel overwhelmed with everything that's going on. There's just extra pressures at work, there's extra pressures in your family life. You feel like, I should be doing this, I should be doing this, I should be doing this. But there's no time to get it all in. We were driving yesterday, and sometimes, we're driving in the car. We've been driving 2 minutes. The kids are already doing our heads in, arguing about this, arguing about that. I've already nearly crashed because the kids are arguing. And the baby's crying because, well, who knows, but the babies always cry in the car. And I'm like, I just want to get to our destination. And so I slowly start to increase the speed, thinking this will make an incredible difference. And then I slowly increase a bit more and increase a bit more. And then I look down and I'm going far above the speed limit. And sometimes life's a bit like that. We just add on, we just add on, we just add on. And then we look down and we say, whoa, what is this pace of life? Because we're actually There's too much going on. And sometimes then we're too busy for the things that really matter in our lives. And we're too busy for the lives that we actually want. We're too busy for the lives that God has for us. And sometimes we're our own greatest enemy. The things that we do and the lives that we live are the biggest obstacle. They're the biggest obstacle in the way for us becoming the people that God wants us to become, or the people that we want to become. And so today we're going to say, what happens when we are too busy for what matters? Because I think most of us probably in this room would say we are busy, and that's the reality of life. We all have stuff to do. We all have essays to write. Well, not me, but if you're a student, you've got essays to write. I don't have any essays to write. Gone are those days. I remember I was talking to someone yesterday, and he was telling me about the church that he was at, and I said, oh yeah, the Mike Dibbins church. I said, I know him. And I was trying to work out how I know him. And this man said, oh, you did your master's degree with him. I said, I can't even remember doing a master's degree. I remember those days, but I blocked it from my mind, writing essays. I don't envy you, but we've all got stuff to do. We've all got money to earn. We've all got, might have children to raise. We've got extra people to take care of in our lives. We've got stuff to sort. We've got dinners to cook. We've got washing up to do. We've got a basket of ironing that is overflowing. And we get busy. And so then we don't have time to read. We don't have time to reflect. We don't have time to have a meal with friends. The good news is, if you're like that, so are the majority of other people in this room. They're also busy because busyness seems to be a way of life. And I think most people are busy. Pretty much everyone is busy. But there was this one guy who never seemed to be busy. And his name was Jesus. And it's a horrible, horrible thought, because it's a great big challenge in our lives when we look at the life of Jesus and the way that Jesus lived. He was never busy. And I'm like, Jesus, how did you manage that? You've got a pretty big assignment. You had a lot to accomplish. But when we read about it, there's never a sense of busyness. There's never a sense of rushing around. We never read about when Jesus says to someone, oh, no, I'm too busy today. We don't see one of the disciples become his PA and say, I can squeeze you in a month's time between 11:53 and 11:57. Can you just email that over to him and he'll deal with it later? Jesus wasn't busy. And I want to be a follower of Jesus. And sometimes the way that we live lives, hey, they're the obstacles for the lives that we actually want. Jesus never ran. Jesus never rushed. Jesus never shouted at his disciples to get a move on. Now, don't get me wrong. I believe that Jesus was busy with important stuff, but he was never rushed. In Mark chapter 2, verse 14, it says this, it's going to come up. As he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax collector's booth. Follow me, Jesus told him. And Levi got up and followed him. Two things to highlight from this. Number one, as Jesus walked along. As Jesus walked along. Not ran along. Not got on his horse and rode along. Didn't say, hey, I'm the Son of God. I deserve to be able to float along or teleport along or have a hovercraft or just even a car. But as Jesus walked along, and he sees Levi there, and Jesus says to Levi, he says, hey, follow me. And so Levi got up and followed him. And by the very nature of that act, if Jesus was walking, then it meant that Levi, his follower, also started to walk. And today our challenge is, if we're going to be followers of Jesus, what pace are we going at? Are our lives too busy for what really matters? Or are we going at the pace that Jesus seemed to go at? And I know that is incredibly hard because you're like, well, Jesus did not have 3 children. Jesus did not have my job or my boss or anything like that. But we're going to try to live the way of Jesus. We are looking at this verse throughout this series in Matthew chapter 11, and this is it in the Message version. It says this, hopefully. Are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you burned out on religion? And maybe, it is the start of the year, but we're always, you know what? Yeah, I am tired. I'm already worn out. Are you burned out on religion? Jesus says, come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. That word again, walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Gets worse, I think, when we look at the actual life of Jesus, because Jesus, he only lived on earth for 33 years. That's not long, and I'm over the age of 33 already. I know, shock, horror. And I look at my life and I'm like, what have I accomplished in my life? Like Jesus was already, saved the world by the time he was under my age. What have I done? And Jesus only lived for 33 years. And the worst thing is Jesus waited until he was 30 years of age before he really started to do anything. And so there was only 3 years of Jesus' life that we can focus on. And so Jesus at the age of 30 starts to think, well, maybe I should start my ministry now. We should get going. And do you know how Jesus started his 3-year ministry? He took a sabbatical. He got away for 40 days in the desert by himself. And I told you it would be frustrating when we really look at the life of Jesus, because I ain't got time for a 40-day sabbatical. I've not got time for this because I'm too busy. And we become too busy for what really matters in our lives. And we're too busy to get away with Jesus. And we become too busy for what really matters. Yesterday we were at a funeral service for an amazing guy. You won't know him, but he was one of the people that mentored me. His name was John Bromley, and he lived a fantastic life. And I used to love going to see John and spending a little bit of time with him. And John would always make time for me. And I knew that I'd have to clear some time. And John always spoke prophetically into my life. And it wouldn't matter. I wouldn't have told him stuff that was going on. And I would talk to John. And John, without me sharing anything, would be able to speak prophetically into my life, into the situations that I was looking at every time. And I was reflecting on John's life as I was preparing this. And it got me thinking, well, how did John do that? Number one, how did John? He always made the time for me. There was always time. And when I would go to his house, he was never rushed. Never rushed. Never wanted me to go. Never saying, come on, I've got my next appointment coming up, Marcus. I've got someone else that I need to see now. There was never a rush, despite the different things that he was doing. And every time he would be able to speak directly into my life. Every time, he'd be able to pray such powerful words over me that really had an impact on my life. And the fact is, John not only made the time to see me, but he made the time to pray. And I would talk to him and he'd say, well, I've prayed into this for as much time as we've talked about it. Because he had got the way of Jesus. He wasn't rushed. Jesus wasn't rushed. Jesus starts his life by taking this sabbatical. And then after his sabbatical, he's got his first miracle coming up. And do you know where Jesus' first miracle was? It was at a wedding. And it was near the end of the wedding. Now, we've got a few weddings coming up this year, which I'm really excited about. I love a wedding, but we also are the people that generally leave weddings early. Because weddings generally, they tend to be on a Saturday. And we generally tend to have church on a Sunday, which is quite an early start. And there's always lots of stuff to do on a Sunday morning. And we've got to prepare this and we've got to prepare that. And we've got to get back from the wedding. And so we're looking at our watches and it's like, all right, they've made the speeches now. So when is an appropriate time for us to slide out the door and make a quick exit? Jesus stays at this wedding, which isn't the example that I want from Jesus. I want an excuse to sneak out because I've got stuff to do. And weddings in this culture, they lasted more than one day. But we know it's near the end of the wedding. Why? Because they've ran out of wine. And Jesus, okay, so I'm like, fine, they've ran out of wine. The wedding might start to wrap up now. An excuse to go home. But what does Jesus do? He turns water into wine. He makes the wedding even longer. Because Jesus wasn't rushed. He stayed at the wedding till the end with people, with family, with friends. Not rushed about. There's another miracle. There's lots of miracles that Jesus does. But Jesus, he's walking along and Jairus, he comes to Jesus, this big, important man, and he says, Jesus, my daughter, she's dying. She's dying. You need to come heal her. And I'd imagine that Jairus is in a little bit of a rush because his daughter is very, very sick. And so Jesus says, okay, come on, take me to her. And so they're walking along and we know there's a big crowd following him, and big crowds never help you get anywhere fast, do they? So there's this big crowd, and I'd imagine that Jairus is getting more and more agitated, saying, come on, Jesus, come on, we need to go and heal my daughter. And then this woman comes along, and in amongst the whole crowd, this woman comes and she pulls on Jesus's cloak. There's a big crowd, there's a lot going on, and Jesus stops. And I imagine Jairus kept on walking, turns around and is like, Jesus, what are you doing? Someone touched me. Yes, Jesus, of course someone touched you. There's people all around us. Come on, Jesus, we've got stuff to do. We've got places to be. My daughter, she is dying. And Jesus, no. Let's wait here because someone touched my cloak. Someone is desperate for a healing touch. And despite the fact that there was a pressing agenda, Jesus stopped. And this woman comes forward. She says, it was me. I touched you. And this woman had had this issue for years and years. She'd been here, she'd been there, she'd been everywhere. And she had had this issue of bleeding for so long. And again, if I'm like Jairus, I'm like, well, Jesus, she's had it for years already. What's another few hours? Come on, let's go. But Jesus stops. And Jesus heals. And as Jesus is healing this woman with the issue of blood, word comes that they're too late and that Jairus' daughter has died. But Jesus says, no, we're going to go anyway. Because here's the thing, Jesus is the controller of time. It doesn't have the same restraints on him that it does on us, and he heals Jairus' daughter anyway. Jesus never rushed. Jesus walked. And so if we're following Jesus, if we want to live how Jesus lived, if we want to be people of the way, which was the name of those first ever Christians, live in the way that Jesus lived, why, if Jesus was not rushing around, are our lives consumed with busyness? With so much to do. Because Jesus didn't rush. he walked. And the thing with this series that we're doing at the moment is it will cause lots of issues and problems in our lives, and it's not really going to give hundreds and hundreds of solutions for us either. Because, I don't know about you, I'm dealing with some of this stuff. Sometimes my life seems quite busy, and there's more stuff that I want to do, but I'm not making time for some of the stuff that I need to do. And I just want to look at 2 reasons today. Well, I'm just going to mention 2 reasons why I think most of us are too busy, too rushed. It's because we're either running to something or we're running from something. We're running from insignificance and we're running to acceptance. We're running from hurt and we're running to freedom, and there's not necessarily things wrong with these. We're running from debt and we're running to riches. Maybe you're running from singleness and you want to run into a relationship. You want to run from loneliness to popularity. But here's the thing, when we chase those things, we're still going to find an empty feeling at the end of it. Because Jesus is the one that fulfills our lives, not those other things. You're like, well, Jesus, listen. Or Marcus, maybe you're saying, and I'm dealing with some of this stuff too, don't worry. He goes, Marcus, it's easy for you because you don't have my job. You work for the church, so you've only got a Sunday morning to deal with. You don't have all of the stuff that I've got to deal with. And you know what? I've not got all of the answers for you because maybe you can't get it all in. Maybe it does not all fit. And I get annoyed. I'm reading several books and stuff like that. And one of them by a guy called Carey Nieuwhof. And it's going through all this time stuff. And I'm just getting more and more frustrated because I'm trying to apply it to my life. And I'm like, yeah, well, it's easy for you to say that, Carey, because you're this big church mega pastor. And you've got someone that runs your social media. And you've got people that can organize your life for you. And I don't have all of the solutions for you today and how to sort it out. But I do know that if we don't make time for what matters, we will burn out. We will dry up and our lives will be unfulfilled when we do not make time for what matters. We've got to make time for what matters. We've got to make time to get away with Jesus. Sometimes though, let's be honest, we do mindlessly spend our time on things that don't really matter. Let's, just 3 examples. Social media. Sorry, but I went there. And we talk about this sometimes at youth. And I will not tell you how much time they say they spend on social media because it would be very embarrassing for some of us. But the average person spends 2.5 hours a day on social media. Some of you are on it right now. 2.5 hours a day on social media. Yeah, but I don't have time to read my Bible. I don't have time to get away and spend a little bit of time with Jesus. But just let me check my TikTok. TV. And sometimes I'm like, I'm too busy and all I want to do is sit back and watch Netflix. And I think this would be one of my biggest things, because sometimes I've just like my mind's burnt out. And there's nothing wrong with social media. There's nothing wrong with Netflix. There's nothing wrong with or Amazon Prime or normal TV if that's what you watch. But the average person spends 2,737 hours a year watching telly. We spend a lot of time watching telly. The biggest one, and this won't be relevant to all of you in this room, but it might be relevant for some of you that are raising teenage boys. By the time an average boy turns 21, they will have spent 10,000 hours on video games. They don't even know what proper video games are these days. Like, I remember my N64, like proper games, Zelda, like, I don't know what they do now, but 10,000 hours by the time they're 21. I don't have time to spend time with you, God. I don't have time to dive a little bit deeper into my Bible. I don't have time to do that block group. Let me just play a little bit more of PlayStation. 10,000 hours. At £10 an hour, that's £100,000. It's about the same time it would take you to read 2,000 books. An average person would probably be able to memorize the New Testament in 10,000 hours. That's enough time to do a graduate's degree, an undergraduate degree, and a master's degree. It's enough time to save a failing relationship. It's enough time to invest heavily into your children and show them the way that God wants them to live. It's enough time to make an incredible difference in your neighborhood and in your community. It's enough time to transform a church. It's enough time to take you from here in your relationship with God to here in your relationship with God. But what do we do now? What do we do now? I don't have all of the answers. I don't have them all. But I know some of the stuff that's going to happen unless we start living the way that Jesus wants us to live. And if you're there today saying, I want a better way, I want a better life, I want a life that works, maybe this is one of the things that Jesus is saying to you. Hey, slow down. If I were to ask you who God is, if you could sum God up in one word, most of you would probably say, hey, God is love. It's the greatest commandment. Love God and love others. Here's the thing, love and busyness don't work well together. If I say to my wife, hey, I love you, I've got to go. Doesn't work. If you want to show someone that you really love them, hey, it's going to take some time. 1 Corinthians 13, the greatest passage in the Bible talking about love, it starts like this: love is patient. It's a challenge, isn't it? It's a challenge because we are called to love God. We are called to love our worlds, but love and busyness don't go hand in hand together. There's this prayer by Craig Rochelle, who we're basing some of this series on. And it's a prayer that we're going to pray, and it's a prayer that I want you to take a challenge this week. Maybe you're not quite sure on how to rework your life to make time for what matters. But it's a prayer that you will definitely have time to pray each morning. I'm not going to give you 20 things to do because, hey, no one's got time for that. But there's a prayer that we can pray and mean each morning. And it's this: God, help me walk slowly enough to experience Jesus fully and love people deeply. God, help me walk slowly enough to experience Jesus fully and love people deeply. And I believe when you pray that prayer and you mean that prayer, not only will God start to do that in your life, but you'll start to do that in your life as well. You'll see different opportunities, because here's the thing, you know what, there's no do this, and your life will be better this morning, because the solutions for each one of us are going to be different today. God is going to need to do different things in different people's lives to get us to slow down, to get us to make time for him. That's why there's no more different steps. And your steps might be different to my steps. Maybe some of you will be prompted this week as you're praying this prayer to be more present in the moment. Maybe that's the moment with God. Maybe that's more present in the moments that you've got with your children, with your spouse, with people that you love. Maybe for some of you, as you start praying this prayer this week, it's going to help you choose what's really important and get rid of what's not important. Maybe for some of you, as you pray this prayer this week, it'll help you sense God's presence more and recognize his voice more in his life, in your life. God, help me walk slowly enough to experience Jesus fully and love people deeply. Hey, why don't band come up? There's one final thought. As Jesus was walking, whilst he was on earth, those 33 years, his slow walk. There's one thing I do know about Jesus' walk. He wasn't just walking randomly or aimlessly. There was a destination that he was walking to, and that was the cross. He was walking towards the cross, where he would show his love in the greatest way possible, where he would give it all. And as we follow Jesus today, as we say, Jesus, I want to follow you, I want to walk where you walked, I believe that Jesus is also going to lead us to the cross, a place where we give our all, sacrifice our all to him. And we're going to sing a song. It's going to say, Jesus, have it all. Take my life and lead me. And as we sing this today, allow God maybe to prompt some things in your life, but make that prayer to God. God, have it all. Have my time. Have my diary. Have my calendar. You can have it all, God. Help me to live a better life as I follow you. Amen.